Hey everybody, what's going on? Hexlex here. I've got another Master Duel video for you. So, today we're going to be doing another one of our Let's Talk About sort of archetype primer type of videos. This time we're going to be doing it on Bystials. Now, normally I like to get these out just as or right before the new pack comes out. This time I admittedly just slipped my mind. I did intend to do one for Bestials a little bit sooner, but it just slipped my mind until the cards have already released. But I still think that this knowledge could prove very valuable in knowing how the Bestials are used, where each one is used, and how to kind of like counteract them, or I guess at least look out for them. So we're going to be covering these cards here a little bit in depth and talking about what kind of decks they can slot into, so on and so forth. So one of the big things about Bystials in particular, as we are all very well aware by now, is that two of their main and actually two of their best cards in the form of Magnamhut and the Bestial Druiswurm both came in at one copy each. Now, if we take a look at these cards' effects, it's definitely not difficult to see why these only came in at one copy each. They are extremely powerful cards. All Bystials, well, let me start by saying this. All level 6 Bystials, of which there are 4, Magnamhut, Sarnier, Druiswurm, and Baldrake. All 4 of these monsters have the same first effect, which says you can target one light or dark monster in either graveyard, banish it, and if you do, special summon this card. This is a quick effect if your opponent controls a monster. So, you might have heard the Bystials referred to as kind of like souped up DD Crows by a number of people, and myself included, and now you can definitely see why this comparison is made. Now, to be fair, the Bystials can't banish any card. They can only banish light or dark monsters specifically. However, especially in this particular meta, but honestly in general as well, light and dark monsters are probably going to be at least half, if not much more, than what you would be banishing with DD Crows anyway. So, Bystials do kind of slot in as more or less direct replacements, even though they are a little bit more limited in what they can banish. The upside, of course, is that, in addition to banishing a card out of the graveyard, you get a body on the board. All of the level 6 Bestial monsters have 2,500 attack and 2,000 defense, and for that reason, they can be very viable threats on their own, especially when combined with some of their effects, as I mentioned before. That refers more to the disruptive ones. Let's talk about more of the utility ones first. Of course, Magnamhut is going to be the first one. This is pretty arguably the best Bestial monster. The most splashable one, I guess is what I mean by that. This card's unique effect is that when it's special summoned, during the end phase of this turn, you can add a dragon monster from your deck or graveyard to your hand, except Magnamhut. So that's obviously pretty strong. Being able to search any single dragon in the entirety of the game is an exceptionally powerful effect, especially when dragons tend to make up the best monsters in the game. And lo and behold, of course, all of these Bestial monsters are all dragons, so of course they can all be searched off the Magnamhut. This is actually pretty relevant, the ability to grab other Bystials, not only being an in-archetype way to advance your game state, or even in-engine, if you're not playing a full-fledged Bestial deck, which, honestly, we'll talk about this in a minute, but it's not really a thing. But, in any case, yeah, the ability to just turbo out any dragon, it is granted during the end phase. However, the ability to grab other Bystials to use as disruption during your opponent's turn is exceptionally powerful. So this card is a good extender in pretty much any deck that it's featured in. It can act as disruption. That's, again, pretty consistent trend with the Bestial monsters. Because they banish light and darks from the graveyard and then summon themselves, they act as both disruption and extender in one, which makes them exceptionally powerful cards here. Alright, so the other kind of utility Bestial monster is going to be Sarnier. This is one of the ones that is at 3. Sarnier has the ability that when it is sent to the graveyard for any reason, from anywhere, you can send a Bestial monster or a branded spell or trap card from your deck to the graveyard, except for Sarnier. So, this effect honestly isn't too useful outside of builds that are using Lubellion and or branded cards, the Bestial Lubellion, this one here. And that's honestly not going to be most decks that just generally splash these cards. The main difference in how Bystials are played when you're using them is going to come down to whether or not you're playing Lubellion, which we'll cover in a minute here. But typically, it's only decks that play branded cards and or want the body of Lubellion through summoning it by its own effect that really want to be playing it. For the most part, generally speaking, Sarnier is not going to be splashed in most decks that are splashing Bystials, just because, again, it is pretty centered around the Bystial and Branded archetypes. So, let's talk about Druiswurm next. Druiswurm is another very, very splashable Bestial monster like Magnamhut. And like Magnamhut, it is also coming in to Master Duel at 1 copy. This card's effect, and it's kind of easy to see why it's at 1 when you read it, if this card is sent from the field to the graveyard, so unlike Sarnier, it does have to go from the field to the graveyard, but it can go for any reason. It can be destroyed by your opponent, destroyed by you, used as a material, whatever. You can target 1 special summoned monster your opponent controls, and then send it to the graveyard. You can only use each effect of Druiswurm once per turn. So, obviously, a very powerful removal option. Doesn't even destroy, it sends. So, cards that protect themselves or others from destruction do not stop the Druiswurm. And, like I said earlier, it does not matter how it is sent from the field to the graveyard. It doesn't matter if you send it, if your opponent sends it. You can use it as a material for a Link Synchro or a Fusion Summon. Xyz, it's not on the field anymore, so that actually doesn't work. But long story short, it's not very hard to proc this card's effect of destroying a special summoned monster, or sorry, sending a special summoned monster your opponent controls to the graveyard. Again, it does not destroy, which is a very important distinction. And this is often going to be, if you're splashing Bystials, this is often going to be what you're searching off of your Magnamhut, right? Which, again, is why this card went to 1. When these cards came out in the TCG and OCG, and these cards obviously debuted at 3 copies each, because nothing in the paper game gets pre-limited, every deck that was second Bystials was pretty much just jamming 3 Magnamhut and 3 Druiswurm, and then like maybe a Sarnier if they want an extra body, but pretty much 3 of each of these will do. Baldrake didn't come along until later in the TCG and OCG. This is actually a card that we're getting a little bit, well, I mean, early is kind of a relative term in Master Duel just because our release schedule is much, much different from the TCG and OCG. But in the paper games, Baldrake came out, I believe, the set after the rest of the Bestials, and maybe some of these other spell and trap cards, but that I'm less aware of. But Baldrake, I know, was not a part of the initial wave. So this card has an effect that says if your opponent special summons a Ritual, Fusion, Synchro, Xyz, and or Link monsters, except during the damage step, you can attribute 1 other light or dark monster, then target 1 of those special summoned monsters, banish it. You can only use each effect of Baldrake once per turn. So here in Master Duel, again, if you're not playing Bestial Lubellion and a more branded / Lubellion focused package in your deck, then Baldrake is going to be like your main 3 of Bestial. This card is actually pretty insane. The ability to banish extra deck monsters as they're being special summoned is very, very good. Now, to be fair, it does not negate the summon. So any effects that trigger when that extra deck monster is summoned, and if that monster has a quick effect, it will be able to activate it in response. So the effect is not negated, but still being able to banish it. And again, we're not destroying. In this case, we're not even putting it in the graveyard. We're outright banishing the card. Very, very good, especially against a lot of top decks right now, namely tier limits. I mean, you can probably guess what. When I say top decks, I mean, I'm sure we're all thinking of pretty much the same deck. Although, to be fair, Branded and Sprite, after this update, are definitely a lot more in contention from tier 1 than I gave them credit for on my tier list. Although, to be fair, when I made that tier list, I didn't know we were getting Sprind, and I think that's pretty much it at that point. But in any case, Baldrake. Baldrake is an exceptionally good card, and if you're playing something like Tier Limit, you're probably going to be playing 1 Magnamhut, 1 Druiswurm, and then 3 Baldrake as your Bestial package, and it is a very, very good package to have. Like I said, this will not only act as disruption in the form of banishing light and dark monsters from your graveyard, but it can then also banish extra deck monsters as well. Now, you do have to tribute another light or dark monster, so it doesn't tribute itself, but in this meta in general, and really also in any deck you're playing Bestials, it should not be a problem at all to have another light or dark monster on the field. It's not uncommon to even have like 2 Bestials, even if you're just splashing them as a package. So in that regard, it can be very easy to trigger the effect of the Baldrake here. Alright, next we're going to talk about Lubellion, and I touched upon this earlier very briefly, but I want to go more into detail because there are a lot of different ways you can splash Bystials. So Bystials as a whole are not really used as an archetype. There's a few reasons for this, right? One is that they kind of lack both good utility cards that are like easy to play, as well as high-end extra deck monsters that are really, really good to summon. Now, to be fair, the latter is going to come in the future. Bystials actually have an exceptionally powerful level 10 synchro monster called the Bestial Dispater. That's not out yet, but when it comes out, we'll talk more about it. And at that point in time, again, Bystials do actually get a pretty exceptional boss monster of their own. But like Bystials, Bestial Dispater will more often not just end up being slotted in as a tech card in extra decks. Again, much like the Bystials themselves. So, Bestial Lubellion, this is a card that you don't really want to be playing in just any deck that's playing Bystials. Now, you might see the effect here, this first one, or I guess technically past all the conditions, the first actual activated effect is you can send this card from your hand to the graveyard, add a Bestial monster from your deck to your hand, except Bestial Lubellion. So you might be thinking like, well, if Magnamhut and Druiswurm, the best Bystials, are at 1 each, why would you not play 3 Bestial Lubellion in order to just search them out? That does seem like a pretty good idea on the surface, and it's not a bad call when you're going first. But one important thing to note about Bestial Lubellion is that it does not have the same summoning condition as the other Bystials. Bestial Lubellion's summoning condition is to special summon it from your hand or graveyard by attributing a level 5 or higher dark dragon monster. This is not a quick effect, by the way, unlike the other level 6 Bestial monsters. So, yeah, this card is summoned typically by tributing one of your Bystials if you're playing it. But again, a lot of these decks, namely Tearlaments, but a lot of these decks that are going to be splashing Bystials are not going to be playing, or in my opinion, should not really be playing Bestial Lubellion. If you want more Bestial cards, like, yes, ideally you would have more copies of Magnamhut and Druiswurm, but again, I think you're going to want to lean towards jamming 3 Baldrake if you're looking for just more Bestial effects in general, because again, Lubellion, unlike all the level 6 Bystials, cannot be used as disruption from your hand during your opponent's turn. And I think in Master Duel in particular, where we're in a best of 1 format when playing ranked in a lot of tournaments, that's going to be exceptionally important. Bestial Lubellion does have another effect. During the main phase, is of course while the card is face up on the field, you can place a branded continuous spell or trap card from your deck face up on your field. So this is also one of the reasons why I said Lubellion is really mainly used in like branded decks, Bestial Lubellion that is, and it's because of the ability to set up continuous branded spell and trap cards. Now, the funny thing about Bystials is that their spell and trap support is actually all branded cards. They're all branded continuous spell and trap cards, so Bestial Lubellion can set those up as well, of course, and we'll often actually be setting one of them that we'll talk about here in a moment, but it can also grab Branded Loss is a big one, and I think that's actually pretty much it in terms of good branded continuous spell or trap cards that don't have to deal with Bystials, but still, the ability to set up the Branded Loss from the deck is exceptionally good, and the Bestial Lubellion not only sets up a Branded Loss from your deck, but more importantly, is a way of sending your big dragon fusion monsters to the graveyard in Branded, because pretty much all of Branded's fusion monsters, except for a couple, a lot of the major ones are level 6 or higher dark dragons, and they all also have effects that trigger when they are sent to the graveyard. I'm thinking particularly, of course, of Mirror Jade, and of course, although that one, is that one dark or light? I'm trying to think of, let me just search Albaz here. Albion, I couldn't think of the name. Yeah, Albion is dark, that's right, because Fusion Lubellion is light, right? Yes. But Fusion Albion is dark. This is another pretty good target to send from your field to the graveyard for Lubellion, as of course it is a level 6 or higher dark dragon, and it will trigger the effect to set up a branded spell or trap directly from your deck. Another pretty good card to send is the new, I'm just going to look up cards because I don't know how to spell the fusion monster's name. Granganol the Dusk Dragon, can also potentially be sent to the graveyard, although this one doesn't actually... Oh, disregard. I thought this one had an effect that activated when it went to the graveyard for some reason, so never mind, forget what I just said. But when it comes to Mirror Jade and Albion, Bestial Lubellion being able to send those to the graveyard definitely adds some good utility to the branded deck. So there is also the case where if you want an easy way to turbo out a level 8 monster and you're also interested in playing the Bestial package, you could make an argument for playing the Bestial Lubellion in that case, but to be fair, it's pretty rare that a deck like that will come along, honestly. So for the most part, Bestial Lubellion is really only going to be played in branded decks. Again, if you're thinking of using this to turbo out your Magnamhut and Druiswurm more easily, I would definitely implore you to play Baldrakes instead, as this can be used as disruption during your opponent's turn. There's also the Bestial Alba Lost. This is not the card I was referring to earlier. This is honestly not a great card. Like, you can really just read the summoning condition and figure that out. Being required to tribute 2 Bestial monsters in order to summon this is a huge ask. To be fair, it's not a bad effect. Like, negating all extra deck monsters is fine. Banishing all of their extra deck cards for a turn is also fine, but for what it takes to bring this out, yeah, definitely not worth it. So I wouldn't even consider this card, to be honest. Branded Regained. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the Bestial spell and trap support, and Branded Regained is a very excellent piece of support. This is a continuous spell card, so it is searchable by the Bestial Lubellion. It says, if a late or dark monster is banished, except during the damage step, you can target one of those monsters, place that monster on the bottom of the deck, and if you do, draw a card. So the cool thing about this effect, not only does it, of course, synergize with all of your Bestial monsters, but note that the condition does not specify where the light or dark monster is banished from. It could be from your graveyard. It could also be from your field. It could be from your hand. It could also be from your opponent's graveyard, field, or hand, or extra deck, or whatever. It doesn't matter where the monster is coming from, you or your opponent, or where on the field, hand, or deck it was. As long as the light or dark monster is being banished, you can put it on the bottom of its owner's deck and then draw a card, which is very, very good. The other effect is also fairly relevant. Once per turn, if your opponent normal or special summons a monster, except during the damage step, you can target a Bestial monster in your graveyard and special summon it. A cool thing to note about this second effect as well, while the first effect is once per turn, the effect to draw a card when a light or dark monster is banished and then put that card on the bottom of the deck, the monster that got banished, the effect to summon Bestial monsters out of the graveyard, that's only once per chain. Like, look at this right here, once per chain. So that means you can potentially, if you went through a number of Bestial monsters on your initial play, which is honestly not hard to do sometimes, this can actually bring back multiple monsters from your graveyard, which will then trigger a lot of their effects. Magnamhut is when it's special summoned, period, not just by its own effect. Sarnier, of course, like I said, is when it's sent to the graveyard. Druiswurm is field to graveyard. And then Baldrake, of course, just needs to be set up on the field. So, most importantly, it's the Magnamhut. The Magnamhut will be triggered when special summoned by Branded Regained. So, this card is actually pretty good. I would consider this occasionally for, like, Chaos decks. This is kind of why I say Lubellion is a little bit more splashable outside of branded decks. Branded Regained is definitely not bad for branded decks as well, but I could definitely see Bestial Lubellion in something like Dragon Link, where you're then setting up a Branded Regained through its effect and then getting to not only draw a card and get you some more advantage from your initial play, but then you can also just be summoning a lot of Bestial monsters during your opponent's turn pretty easily as well for something like Dragon Link. So it's definitely worth considering outside of Branded, but it's just for something like Tearlament, I think that's definitely a bit much to ask, especially because they're typically not banishing their dark monsters. Alright, a couple more cards to talk about. Branded Beast is going to be a continuous trap card. This one's okay. Once returned to the main phase, if you control a Bestial monster, you contribute a dragon. Target a card your opponent controls, destroy it. That's obviously, disruption is good, but this is, to be fair, targeted and destruction. It's not sending or banishing, and it does require you to tribute basically a Bestial monster you control. To be fair, you just have to control Bestial and then tribute a dragon, but a lot of the time it's just going to be the dragon you control as the Bestial. The end phase effect is pretty neat and is honestly the more relevant, slightly more relevant. To be fair, the destruction effect, it can be very relevant very easily. But the second effect, during the end phase, you can target a branded continuous spell or trap card in your graveyard, place it face up on the field. So definitely not a bad effect. This card is probably going to be played more in Branded specifically. Unlike Lubellion and Branded Regained, which you have potential outside of Branded, this is pretty much just going to be used in that Branded decks there. And then the last card is Branded Befallen. I honestly don't even know what this does off the top of my head. Let's read it together. Once per turn, when your opponent activates a card or effect that targets a bestial monster you control and no other cards, already a tough sell for a disruption, or I guess in this case, protection from disruption. Or when your opponent activates a card or effect in response to the activation of your bestial monster effect, you can target a light or dark monster in either graveyard, banish it, and if you do, negate that activated effect. So, yeah, this card is definitely just not good at all. It's very limited in when you can activate it, and even when you do, you still have to pay a cost of banishing a light and dark monster out of the graveyard, and you don't even destroy, send, or banish the card you're negating. You only negate it. So this card is just very conditional and not that powerful of an effect, so not considered at all. In fact, we can even just omit that, as well as Albalos. These two branded, or not branded, Bestial cards, I would pretty much never play in anything. The rest of them, though, are definitely worth consideration, so this does end up being a fairly strong archetype. It is just, like I said, pretty much just going to be a splash in other decks. Bestial is not really its own deck at all. I mean, it technically can be, but yeah, it's mainly going to be splashed in Tearlaments, Branded, and then Dragon Link, Chaos decks, just decks that really care about light and dark monsters, light and or dark monsters, are going to be jamming these Bystials here. It is also possible to tech this card if you really, really want to, even if you're playing minimal light or dark monsters yourselves. Because to be fair, there is a lot of Tearlament and Branded running around, so there is no shortage of light and dark monsters to banish from the opponent's graveyard. But I will say that I'm very weary about doing that. I don't think that's generally a good strategy. Like, if you're playing something like, I don't know, Maransis, or what's another deck that doesn't use light or darks, really? But if you're not playing light or darks natively, you probably shouldn't be trying to use Bystials as disruption. I think at that point, they become much more situational DD Crows. The real strength from them is from the ability to not only utilize them as disruption, but again, as extenders as well. So you want to make sure that you're consistently able to use them in both cases, not just one or the other. So that pretty much covers everything there is to know about the Bestial archetype. So hope that cleared up some questions that some of you may have had about the Bystials, and as far as like what decks are they played in, and how many are played. Again, if you're talking about Tearlament, I would recommend the Magnamhut, the Druiswurm, and then 3 Baldrake, and that's probably just fine there. If you're playing Branded, then you can start looking at the Lubellion and the Branded Regain, maybe Branded Beast, and even Sarnier as well. I say even Sarnier, but Sarnier is actually a pretty strong contender in general. But yeah, I think that's going to go ahead and do it. So I hope you all found some of this information helpful. And if you have any questions about Bystials, or I mean anything really, of course, feel free to drop it in the comment there. I'm also pretty active on Twitter. The link in that is in the description, and feel free to check that out as well. But let's go ahead and just move now to our outro. Alright everybody, thank you so much for watching all the way to the very end of the video like this. That means a whole lot to me. Not just personally, but it's also a great way of supporting the channel as well. If you're interested in supporting the channel in other means, you can of course feel free to comment and or subscribe right here on YouTube. I'm always looking to the comments section. You guys leave some pretty awesome feedback as far as like constructive criticism goes when it comes to deck building, gameplay, channel content, all that stuff. So feel free to leave your opinion down there. I will be sure to take a look at that there. And then subscribing is going to be the best way to get notifications of when these videos drop. That does happen every day, by the way, so if you're looking for daily Master Duel content, you've come to the right place. And there are more places where you can get some daily Master Duel content. If you check out the description below, follow the top link over to my Patreon page. There for just $5 a month, which is as much as you pay for a booster pack. You'll find a lot more value than a pack full of filler over there. We've got some previews for content upcoming here on the channel. We've got some exclusive games that are only posted over on Patreon over there. We've got some Q&As, and then you can also have your name featured in this lovely credit sequence where I thank all of the people who are helping contribute over there on Patreon. It's a huge support to the channel, and it really means a lot as well. So thank you everyone who is donating. that is featured here on screen. And again, you know, it's not just a pure donation. You do get some more daily Master Duel content over there just for being a part of the Patreon. But I think that's about all the time that I have for today's video. Once again, I just want to thank you so very much for sticking all the way to the end of the video. Again, it just means a lot, as I do put a decent amount of work into getting these videos out every single day. But that's about all the time that I've got for now. So without further ado, this is Xlex. I'm signing out, and I hope you have a fantastic day.